Hello, and the longest month of the year is over. I can predict wholeheartedly that there will not be a month this year, possibly, that can last as long as January felt it did. Looking at the books that I read earlier this month, like last month, it's dumbfounding. I feel like I read that millennia ago. I was a different person. Here we are, 2025, the first month's down. I've read 7 books. Um, I did not give anything a whole 5 stars.
Hater.
Yeah, Grace lambasted me in the Discord for it. Certified hater. I did give some 4.5s though, and I've made some videos, or will be making videos about some of the books I read this month. Let's jump into it. Let me know what you read in January. Did the month feel as long as it did for you as it did for me? I won't lie, after how quick everything's gone since COVID, it's nice to have a month that seemed to have made up for all the lost time. The first book I finished was an arc for a book that is now out. You'll notice it's not in my hands. And that is We Do Not Part by Han Kang. That's a book that I will be waiting to get in paperback personally because I have the other work by her in paperback. And now that I've read it, I don't mind waiting for a paperback. I've also made a video on this and all of Han Kang's work that I've read up to date, so if for more in-depth thoughts on this book and her over it in general, that's where it will be. But essentially, this follows a woman who, at the beginning of the book, is trying to and just rewriting her will. And she is suddenly called by a friend who has had an accident and has cut off the tops of her fingers. And essentially, the book follows this bizarre melding of a loss of time, a loss of space. Is what's happening real? Is it due to medical issues? Is it due to all kinds of factors that could be changing our main character's perception of reality? And the book kind of just does what it's doing. In my opinion, I gave it 4.5 stars. I think it was a fantastic book. At the end, it just brought everything together in a way that was deeply, deeply haunting and deals with the real world violent putting down of a guerrilla movement in South Korea. Is kind of the culmination of all of Han Kang's work to date so far, is how I described it in that video. There are elements to all of her books that reappear and kind of work together. There's communication between her previous books and this one. It's a real fan's book in the sense of that there's nothing better to me as a reader than if I've read several works and they all start to converse with each other, and you get those intertextual references and little bits of refinement or clarification that creates a real, like, brilliant image of that writer and what they're trying to do. So, as always, I recommend Han Kang. Whatever work you pick up, I understand that. Like I said, that I wouldn't recommend it as a beginning place. I still think Human Axel the Vegetarian is the way to go, but it's a hell of a place to end. I then continued and finished Winter's Heart in January. Book 9 of the Wheel of Time. What did I give this one? 3.5 stars. I enjoyed this one. This had a fantastic opening, and then the rest of the book happened, and then it had a really great ending. Like last maybe 25%, 20%. I still don't necessarily feel the slog. To me, there really isn't too much variation in the quality compared to the other books in this series so far. I think there's just a lot more downtime and machinations, but like really fucking slow machinations. It feels like it's going the pace of real life. You're like, this needs to get a move on. I'm not actually reading this for the rest of my life. These people need to start making their moves rather than putting themselves in the position to make their moves. But this has some of my favourite scenes in the series so far. The climax to this book was crazy. It was something that the reason this works so well compared to other endings in this series is that this one is the culmination of something that I've been waiting for the entire series. And I wasn't expecting that thing to happen in this book. And so it was just a nice surprise. I think it was higher than my expectations were based on how people talk about it. And yeah, apart from a draggy middle, it was a really like satisfactory book. Continuing my reading Virginia Woolf's full bibliography, I read A Room of One's Own again. I read this for university originally. I was reading it in a sense of pulling quotes. And so I wasn't reading to see what Virginia Woolf was saying. I was reading to see what Virginia Woolf was saying and how it could lend to what I was doing. So it was nice to revisit it and read it to appreciate her actual thoughts and opinions. And I gave it 4 stars again. Reason being is that I think she has extremely salient and interesting points. The main stepping stone for me, that the main falling off point, is that she definitely relies on a sense of middle class centering. Like, she talks about the idea of like, what could women create if they had a room of one's own, and then adds the addendum of and £500 without working for it, which is to provide the context of, with inflation, that's about 30 grand in the UK now, which is like, I think that's about the average or above the average wage for a person in the UK. And so she's talking about just having that without working, like without doing anything. And so it comes from that has to come from not even a middle class, but an upper middle to upper class, of the idea of inheritance, having an inheritance that means that you don't have to work, which she did. And that's the only difference for me, is that she's trying to make a societal statement, but she is hampered by her experience and the fact that she kind of makes it seem like that should be the ordinary, but it's like, that's never going to be the ordinary. So I wish you'd have written about reality, please. But it is what it is. She still has fantastic points about the idea of a literary canon for women, and it's interesting now, like, revisiting it 100 years after the fact, where that canon is beginning to take shape, and the intertextual references and the commentary between generations now is starting to appear and be there, and it's fantastic. Like, it's a really interesting, like, benchmark. Then I started 2 new series. Well, I'm rereading 1 series, but the Patreon pick, which is also a Discord read, is The City of Brass, the first in the Daverbad trilogy. So people are getting involved in there. It's been a lot of fun. There's a few people that have already read it. Some people are rereading it, and then there's people like me who is new. I gave this 4.5 stars. I've made a video about it, so if you want more in-depth views, it's there. But this was really fantastic. Secret world fantasy that really delivered on political machinations, really delivered on the idea that everyone's a bastard and everyone's being a bastard, and you're not quite sure who to trust, and your characters are grey, like morally grey, and everything was just delivered in a way that I was really happy with at the end. Also, S.A. Chakraborty twists some tropes, some things that I actually don't like in fantasy get twisted here, and it's nice to read a counterbalance and a commentary on tropes that I don't enjoy, which I think also elevated it. It does have a kind of slower middle, but I think that the middle develops the characters to being invested at the end. I think it's a necessary thing to get to where we end up off. And then I reread The Fellowship of the Ring. I read The Hobbit in December, and then this is the official start of the read along that is me, Grace, Murphy, and Bryce, and it's a lot of fun. I moved it up. I originally rated this 4 stars. It's now a 4.5. I love Tom Bombadil, his yellow booties and gold brie. They're just the best. Now, is this kind of informed by the fact that Grace and I also went to go watch The Return of the King in theatre with the full orchestra? Maybe. I was reading it while we went to watch it, and it was a lot of fun. But I was already like 2/3 of the way through. So if anything, it just helped me through Lothlorien. I love this book. The sense of scale, the sense of travel. Tolkien is one of the only authors that really makes me feel like I'm traveling somewhere. He has the level of heart, the level of humor, the level of cynicism, the level of sinister goings on. There's a lot of creepiness in the film and such things that in the book that I think I don't know, like being a fan of the film and reading it for the first time throws you off because like that yeah that it's such a different experience. It's slower, it's more cerebral, it's much more centered on this sense of travel and yeah, there's a lot of different there's it's just a different tone. Uh like in terms of the pacing and the storytelling fashion, it captures the emotion and it captures the feeling of Middle Earth, but they're focusing on different things essentially in the different forms, um, and so I think it's taken a reread for me to appreciate what Tolkien is going for, rather than me reading it and thinking about how it's different to the films. I read another arc this month as well, which was The River Has Roots. This was one of my anticipated books of the year, um, because I love This Is How We Lose the Time War, or This Is How You Lose the Time War. And I was looking forward to what she was going to do in her first solo piece in terms of a longer form. I've read a couple of short stories by her as well. And The River Has Roots is this very interesting fairy tale esque story about two sisters who sing to this woods that are kind of magical, and that's kind of what they do. And then it gets involved. She is dating this person from Arcadia, this kind of another kind of it's a classic like world across the water type thing, or world across the like through a veil there's a secret magical world that's not quite so secret in this. And Arcadia is that people travel there, they get lost there, and it changes their life in some way that they don't expect. And we're following two sisters who have been there in childhood, came out, and now one of the sisters likes being where they are. One of the sister kind of longs to go back. And yeah, so she's dating one of the people from Arcadia, and there's a kind of local guy who's also interested. That's the basic setup. It's a very short little novella. Um, my overall feelings that I enjoyed the story. I was invested throughout, and I was interested in all the characters. It was really wittily written, and it was what?
It was really what?
Wittily.
Oh, I thought you said wittily.
Oh, it was really wittily written.
I was like, I don't know what that means.
It was really wittily written, and then and it had really great dialogue. But my issue really that moved the whole book down to a 3.25 was that I was dumbfounded by the magic system, or how the magic system connected in any way to the story being told. The magic system is called grammar, and they're like the magicians are called grammarians, and the river is called grammar, and magic is grammar, and they talk about like if you're using magic you are conjugating, and it's all to do with language, this idea of the manipulation, and the conjugating brought this idea of time involved because it's the changing of the tense of words and everything. And so I was expecting that, because it's so heavily signposted in the beginning of this idea of grammar and conjugating and everything, that was going to play a part in the actual ending or something, and it doesn't. Instead, grammar is just magic, and it's just a fairy story, and it's just it it's a very basic magical structure that is trying to make it sound more important or more unique than it is by putting this label of grammar on it. Where I found that I enjoyed the story more if I just removed that veneer and was just like, oh, this is a magic story, this is magic, they're magic, and they sing to fairies. So much better, because the stuff that happens with the magic is more centered in music and song, and I mean actual music, like played music. So it's not like I can even be like, oh well, the song, the idea of language, etc., because music becomes a big part of it, and so that removes itself from this idea of grammar, and instead a lot of the magic system is to do with voice and singing. And I was just like, why would you not focus on that element? If that's going to be the part that ties this whole story together, fuck the grammar part. I understand you're El-Mohtar and you really like writing pretty stuff and you love language, but the magic system did not supplement or lend anything to the story being told. Whereas I think if it had just gone for a more simple approach and added a musical element, then it would have tied the whole piece together. Instead, I feel like I was info dumped on something that didn't matter. So that was the reason that it ended up just being kind of a mid rating for me, is because I felt like the story was being hampered by a magic system that didn't need to be as complicated or as vague as it was in the end. And it's not really complicated, it's just vague. And it's vague by the purpose of that you're like, well, what was the point? Rather than they didn't tell me enough specifics. And then the final book I read this month was a juggernaut, an absolute juggernaut. You can see why it took me a lot of time, because it is Dust of Dreams, this 1,200-page behemoth. Book 9 in Malazan Book of the Fallen. I am reading Dust of Dreams and Cripple God back to back. I am currently 250 pages or something into Cripple God. I'm finishing Malazan. I'm terrified. Dust of Dreams was an absolute insane book. It had one of the craziest openings in a Malazan book, and it was the coolest opening. In one half of the plot line, and then the other half of the plot line, even though we are in Stephen Erikson's mind, the last volume of this text, he's introducing a whole new bunch of shit and a whole new bunch of perspectives and all kinds of jazz that I was bleeding from my eyes as I was enjoying the other half, because I was just baffled. And but that's Malazan, that's kind of the whole deal. And it's definitely a book that, now that I've ended it and gone into Cripple God, I'm very interested to reread it. It's now Dust of Dreams and Gardens of the Moon are the ones I'm most looking forward to rereading when I get round to that. And the book is very much journey before destination. But the destination informs why the journey was so important. So people reading Dust of Dreams, I can understand why they find it extremely frustrating. I also think that this is the first book I've had that has too many similar factions in the same area, where I was getting so lost. This is the first book where I was like, I should have made notes about who the characters were when they first showed up, because I forgot every time, because the names and everything and the cultures, that the way Stephen Erikson writes, it takes a while for you to know what character you're following. And so even when the names dropped, I'm like, who is this? What the fuck's going on? And we're mixing around so often that I found that to be frustrating. Coming after Toll the Hounds, I thought Toll the Hounds had one of the craziest endings I've read in fantasy. And then Dust of Dreams literally blew my fucking brain. It blew my mind. I was left absolutely flabbergasted by the end of Dust of Dreams. And it wasn't in a way that I wasn't expecting or anything. It was just all this stuff that you've been kind of waiting for just fucking blasts you, just hits you full in the face. And I read that it was the last 2 chapters was just a complete roller coaster ride. It was exhilarating. I was like sat there and I felt my legs shaking because I was just like completely invested. And as a result, I'm currently rating this book 4.5. It could well be a 4 or a 4.25, but the ending blew my mind enough that I'm like, I'm not getting that experience anywhere but Malazan, and I'm not getting that experience anywhere but this book. And so they're all 4.5s to me, because they're all so perfect apart from very small niggles, and those niggles hamper every single book. Like, I've only given a couple of 5 stars in this series, and even those I'm like, no, I know there are flaws, but I'm willing to ignore them. And that's kind of what I love about Malazan. By no means a perfect series. It's nowhere near a perfect series, but a lot of it is as close to perfection as you're going to get it. It's going to be a hell of an end of an era. I have no idea how the Crippled God is going to end, which is exactly how I want it to be. I have hopes and dreams, and based on every character I know from Malazan who had hopes and dreams, I'm going to be fucking crushed. So, I'm looking forward to it. All in all, that was my month of January. Pretty damn solid, if you ask me. No 5 stars, much to the dismay of Grace Dion, but still a very happy month for me. If you did enjoy, please do like, please do subscribe. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. If you want to join, get involved in any of the read-alongs for Fellowship, not Fellowship, well, the Fellowship one as well, and Daverbad. The Discord link's in the description. And as always, have a nice rest of your day.
As always, don't have a nice rest of your day.
Yeah, you fucking lamos. I probably won't keep that in. Okay, that's that then.